March 2017, Palm Beach Polo and Country Club, Florida. At exactly 2:47 p.m., the man who walked through the doors of one of America's most exclusive clubs didn't fit the atmosphere at all. Long brown hair, worn black boots, and a faded Harley Davidson t-shirt. Everyone recognized the elegant woman on his arm, Sharon Osbourne, darling of high society. But no one looked at the man beside her. Or rather, they looked, but didn't see. One of the hostess's friends adjusted her pearl necklace and asked, "Sharon, darling, is this your driver?" The man didn't answer. He just smiled, a tired, familiar smile. But no one knew that he was Ozzy Osbourne, one of the biggest names in rock history. Sharon had called 2 weeks earlier. They were invited to her closest friend Tinsley Hartwell Pierce's annual spring party in Palm Beach. Tinsley was one of the few people Sharon had met during her cancer treatment who had stood by her through those difficult days. Now she had become one of her closest friends, or at least that's what Sharon thought. The invitation card read, "Garden Party, Smart Casual," but Sharon knew what her husband would wear. Ozzy had 3 suits in his wardrobe, one for funerals, one for award ceremonies, and one for what Sharon called emergencies. And today, none of them would be worn. When Ozzy got out of the car, Sharon took a deep breath, but said nothing. She just took her husband's arm and they walked toward the entrance. The reception area was surrounded by white columns in colonial style. Giant palm trees provided shade, and in the distance, the polo field stretched out like a green sea. Waiters carried champagne and canapes on silver trays. The women's hats seemed to compete for extravagance. Men in linen suits laughed while adjusting their Hermes ties, and right in the center, Tinsley Hartwell Pierce, in an ivory dress, commanded her palace like a queen. When she saw Sharon, her face lit up, and she walked toward her with open arms. The 2 women hugged and complimented each other's outfits. But when Tinsley's eyes drifted to the man behind Sharon, her expression froze for just a moment. Only a moment, but Ozzy caught that look. He had seen that look his entire life. The "what are you doing here" look. The "you're not one of us" look. From the back streets of Birmingham to the polo clubs of Palm Beach, that look had never changed. Tinsley quickly composed herself and smiled. That professional society smile. She extended her hand to Ozzy but didn't hug him. She had hugged Sharon. It was a small detail, but Ozzy noticed. He always noticed. At that moment, 3 more women approached. Tinsley introduced them. Muffy, Bitsy, and Constance. The sharpest-tongued, most ruthless jury of Palm Beach society. The women smiled at Sharon, but only stared at Ozzy. Their eyes held an open judgment. Muffy adjusted her pearl necklace and asked, "Sharon, darling, is this your driver?" In that moment, time seemed to stop. Sharon's face turned bright red. She opened her mouth to say something, but Ozzy acted first. There was a strange expression on his face, neither anger nor hurt, just a tired acceptance. "No, madam," he said in that familiar Birmingham accent. "I'm not the driver." Then he looked around, spotted the stables in the distance, and continued. "But do you know where the stables are? I need to tend to the horses." Sharon looked at her husband in horror. "Ozzy, what are you doing?" she whispered. But Ozzy just winked and started walking toward the stables. Tinsley and her friends looked relieved. As Ozzy walked toward the stables, the laughter behind him rang in his ears, but he didn't care. In fact, this was exactly what he wanted. To get away from those pretentious people, those fake smiles, those judgmental looks. The stables were about 100 meters from the main building. As he got closer, the smell of horses filled his nostrils, and he felt strangely relaxed. This smell reminded him of Birmingham. As a child, he would sometimes go to the farms outside the city, watch the horses, feed them. It was free entertainment for a poor kid. 3 people were working in front of the stable, 2 young men and an older one. They were all in dirty work clothes. When they saw Ozzy, they stopped and stared in surprise. The older man, in his 60s, with a sun-weathered face and calloused hands, was the first to speak. "Can I help you, sir? You look lost." Ozzy smiled. For the first time that day, it was a genuine smile. "Actually quite the opposite," he said. I think I found the right place. They thought I was a driver back there, so I figured, if that's the case, I might as well go check on the horses. The first drivers used to drive horses, after all. The old man was surprised, but then laughed. It was a rough, sincere laugh. Please come in, he said. I'm Hector. Been working in this stable for 30 years. Ozzy shook his hand. I'm Ozzy, from Birmingham. I used to love horses. Hector nodded and invited him inside. There were 12 horses in the stable, all racing quality, each worth a fortune. But for Hector and his men, they were more than money. They were creatures to be cared for, to be loved. Ozzy approached one of the horses and extended his hand. The horse became restless, but then calmed down and pressed its nose into Ozzy's palm. Hector watched in amazement. This horse doesn't let anyone near, he said. Mrs. Hartwell Pierce's favorite, but a stubborn one. Hours passed. The party continued, but Ozzy had stayed in the stable. Hector offered him tea in a plastic cup, no sugar. Ozzy sipped it as if it were the best tea he'd ever had in his life. Hector introduced him to every horse in the stable, their names, their temperaments, their stories. Ozzy listened, really listened. No one had asked Hector questions like these in years. Where did this horse come from? How does she perform in races? Can she sleep at night? Normal questions, but they meant the world to Hector. At one point, one of the young workers, a kid in his 20s named Carlos, turned to Ozzy and asked, You don't work with horses, do you? Your hands look too clean. Ozzy looked at his hands, those wrinkled but well-kept hands. He smiled. No, son, he said. I'm a singer. Oh, really? Said Carlos, uninterested. What kind of music? Rock, heavy metal. Carlos's expression didn't change. Don't really know that kind of music, he said. But you look cool. Ozzy laughed. It was one of the best compliments he'd ever received in his life. Meanwhile, in the main building, Sharon was anxiously searching for her husband. Tinsley approached her, with a fake expression of concern on her face. Sharon, darling, that man you were with seems to have gotten lost. Is everything all right? Sharon turned to her, and the fire in her eyes made Tinsley step back. Tinsley, Sharon said in an ice-cold voice. That man is my husband, Ozzy Osbourne, the lead singer of Black Sabbath, a rock legend who has sold over 100 million albums, and your guests thought he was a driver. Tinsley's face went completely white. Then she began to stammer. Sharon, I didn't know, really. I'm so sorry. But Sharon had already walked away, heading toward the stables. Behind her, Tinsley's panicked voice could be heard. Muffy, Constance, we have a problem. When Sharon arrived at the stable, the sight before her stopped her in her tracks. Ozzy was sitting on the ground, on hay bales. Beside him were Hector and 2 young workers, plastic cups in their hands, smiles on their faces. They looked like old friends who had known each other for years. Ozzy was telling them something, probably one of his old tour stories, because Hector was laughing heartily. Sharon paused for a moment. She hadn't seen her husband this relaxed in a very long time. Even in their mansion in Los Angeles, surrounded by famous friends, he never looked this peaceful. But now, sitting in a stable with stable hands, the real Ozzy had emerged. The working-class kid from the poor neighborhoods of Birmingham. When Sharon entered, Ozzy looked up and smiled. Sharon, come meet everyone, he said. This is Hector. Been working here for 30 years. And this is Carlos. He doesn't listen to music, but he said I look cool. Sharon smiled, but her eyes were moist. Ozzy, she said. Tinsley and the others. They know now who you are. Ozzy shrugged. It doesn't matter, Sharon. It really doesn't matter. But the expression on Sharon's face said something different. No, Ozzy, it matters. I saw how they treated you. They called you a driver, as if you were... Her voice trembled, and she couldn't continue. Ozzy stood up and walked over to his wife. He placed his hands on her shoulders and looked into her eyes. Sharon, he said softly, I'm not the kind of man who makes being a driver a matter of pride. My father worked the night shift at a factory. My mother cleaned rich people's houses. I worked at a butcher shop, for God's sake. I cleaned out animal guts at a slaughterhouse. Being a driver is a better job than all of those. At that moment, there was movement at the stable door. Tinsley Hartwell Pierce was walking in, with Muffy, Bitsy, and Constance behind her. Their high heels sank into the straw and dirt. Their expensive dresses were getting covered with stable dust, but they didn't care. Their faces held a mixture of panic, shame, and fear. Tinsley stepped forward, her hands trembling. "Mr. Osbourne," she said, her voice cracking. We're so sorry. We didn't know. We really didn't know who you were." Muffy cut in. "If we had known, we never would have— if we had recognized you." She couldn't finish her sentence because she didn't know what to say. Constance was crying silently, her mascara running down her cheeks. Perhaps for the first time in her life, she was feeling genuine shame. Ozzy looked at them, a long, silent look. Under this gaze, Tinsley and her friends shrank, withered. They had failed to recognize and looked down upon a rock legend, a man with hundreds of millions of fans. If this story got out, they would never be looked at the same way in Palm Beach society again. Their careers, their reputations, everything could be over. All Ozzy had to do was tell this story in an interview. TMZ, People magazine, even a single social media post would be enough. But Ozzy said nothing. He just turned to Tinsley and asked, "Mrs. Hartwell-Pierce, right?" Tinsley nodded, unable to speak. Ozzy continued, "Hector told me about you. He said you love this stable very much, that you come every morning to give sugar to Moonlight, that stubborn horse." Tinsley looked at him in surprise. "Yes," she whispered. "I love her very much." Ozzy smiled. "Then you can't be a bad person. People who love horses are usually good people. It's just that sometimes they forget to love people." Tinsley's eyes filled with tears. "Mr. Osbourne, Ozzy raised his hand. "Call me Ozzy, and let's not bring this up again. What's done is done. But I am going to ask something of you." Tinsley jumped in immediately. "Anything. Whatever you want." Ozzy looked inside the stable, at Hector and the young workers. Then he turned back to Tinsley. "Hector has been working here for 30 years, he said. "He takes care of your horses like they're his own children, but I bet his salary is just above minimum wage. And Carlos is in college working here at night to pay his way. Give them a raise, a real raise, and cover Carlos's tuition." Tinsley paused for a moment, then nodded. "Of course. I'll take care of it right away." Ozzy smiled, but his eyes remained stern. "And Mrs. Hartwell-Pierce, one more thing." Tinsley waited. "Next time, think twice before judging someone by their clothes, because that person could be a driver or a stable hand, or they could be a rock star. They all deserve the same respect." When they walked out of the stable, the sun had begun to set. The polo field was bathed in golden light. The party was still going on, but the atmosphere had changed. The news had spread. That man in jeans and a t-shirt was Ozzy Osbourne, Black Sabbath's Ozzy, the Prince of Darkness. People were whispering, pulling out their phones, trying to take photos secretly. But Ozzy didn't care. He had taken Sharon's arm and was walking slowly toward their car. Just as they were about to exit through the gate, they heard a voice behind them. "Mr. Ozzy!" Hector was running toward them, holding something in his hand. Ozzy stopped and turned around. Hector reached them, out of breath, and held out what was in his hand. It was an old, worn horseshoe. "This is Moonlight's first shoe," Hector said. "It fell off 15 years ago when she was still a foal. I kept it. I believe it brings luck. It's yours now." Ozzy took the horseshoe, his fingers tracing over the rusty metal. He looked at Hector and saw something in his eyes. He saw himself. That boy from 68 years ago, sneaking into horse farms in the back streets of Birmingham, loving horses, talking to them, that lonely child. "Thank you, Hector," Ozzy said, his voice hoarse. "I'll keep this forever." Then he pulled something from his pocket. It was a small silver cross necklace. "My mother gave this to me," he said, "so I'd go to church. I never went, but the necklace always stayed with me. Now it's yours." Hector blinked, not knowing what to say, but Ozzy had already placed the necklace in the man's hand. "See you someday, Hector," he said, "and take good care of your horses. They love you." As the car pulled out of the parking lot, Sharon looked at her husband. Ozzy was staring out the window, still holding that rusty horseshoe. Sharon wanted to say something, but the words wouldn't come. Finally, she just took her husband's hand and squeezed it. Ozzy turned to look at her and smiled. That tired, familiar, loving smile of his. "It was a good day," he said. Sharon looked at him in disbelief. "Good? They looked down on you, Ozzy. They excluded you." Ozzy shrugged. "But then they apologized. And I met Hector. I met Carlos. They're good people, Sharon. Real people. The party might be fancy, the champagne might be expensive, but I had my best conversation in the stable." Sharon shook her head. After more than 40 years of marriage, this man could still surprise her. A week later, Tinsley Hartwell Pierce called Sharon. Her voice was different, softer, more genuine. She said they had given Hector and Carlos raises. Carlos's tuition would be covered. And there was something else. Tinsley had established a charity fund for stable workers. She had named it Ozzy's Stable Fund. When Ozzy heard this, he laughed. "God damn it, Sharon," he said. "I just drank some tea and loved some horses. Now a charity bears my name." Sharon smiled. "That's what you think," she said. But something happened in that stable. Tinsley changed. Those women changed. Maybe for the first time in their lives, they felt real shame. And sometimes shame makes people better. Years later, when Hector retired, he gave an interview to a local newspaper. They asked him about his most unforgettable memory from Palm Beach. Hector smiled and pulled out that silver cross necklace still hanging around his neck. "One day a man came to the stable," he said, "with his old boots and ripped jeans. Everyone thought he was a driver, but he was just a man who loved horses, just like me. He taught me something that day. A person's clothes, money, fame, none of it matters. What matters is whether the horses love you. And that stubborn horse, Moonlight, approached a stranger for the first time in her life that day. Horses know. They see inside people." The reporter asked, "Who was that man?" Hector smiled. "His name was Ozzy," he said. "A singer, I think. But to me he was just a good man. And in this world, good people are rarer than rock stars." There's nothing written in Palm Beach Polo Club's records about that day. Tinsley Hartwell Pierce never mentioned that party again. Muffy, Bitsy, and Constance still appear in society columns, but now they think twice before judging someone by their clothes. And in Ozzy Osbourne's house in Beverly Hills, a rusty horseshoe still sits on the mantelpiece above the fireplace.